Melissa and I are launching our consulting firm next month, Tyler announced casually over breakfast, not even looking up from his Eggs Benedict. The words hit me like ice water, but I kept my expression neutral, continuing to sip my coffee as if he had just mentioned the weather. My name is Lorraine. I'm 49 years old, and I've been married to Tyler for 8 years. We live in a beautiful colonial home in Charlotte, North Carolina, where I work as a senior marketing director for Amberlin Ventures, a successful investment firm. Tyler runs his own financial advisory practice, or at least that's what I thought until this morning's revelation. That's wonderful, honey, I replied, forcing enthusiasm into my voice. Tell me more about this partnership. Tyler finally looked up, his blue eyes sparkling with excitement I hadn't seen in months. Melissa brings incredible expertise in corporate restructuring. We complement each other perfectly. She handles the operational side while I focus on financial strategy. Something cold settled in my stomach. In 8 years of marriage, Tyler had never mentioned anyone named Melissa, especially not someone he'd be going into business with. He was usually meticulous about sharing professional details, often boring me with stories about his clients and colleagues. How did you two meet? I asked, keeping my tone light and curious. Oh, we've known each other for years, he said vaguely, returning his attention to his plate. She recently moved back to Charlotte from Atlanta. Perfect timing, really. The evasiveness was unlike him. Tyler was typically forthcoming about his business connections, often name-dropping and sharing elaborate backstories about how he'd cultivated various professional relationships. This casual dismissal felt deliberately obscure. What's her background? I pressed gently. Finance and operations. She's got an MBA from Duke and about 15 years of consulting experience. He stood up abruptly, checking his watch. I should get going. Meeting with our lawyer today to finalize the partnership agreement. As he kissed my cheek goodbye, I caught a whiff of a different cologne, something woodsy and expensive that I'd never smelled on him before. The scent lingered long after his Mercedes pulled out of our driveway. I sat at our granite kitchen island, surrounded by the morning stillness of our perfectly appointed home. The silence felt heavy, loaded with unspoken questions. In my gut, I knew something was fundamentally wrong with this picture. Tyler's excitement about Melissa seemed to carry an undercurrent I couldn't identify yet, but every instinct told me to pay attention. That evening, when Tyler returned home later than usual, his enthusiasm about the consulting firm had only grown more animated, and I smiled supportively while my mind began forming a plan to uncover exactly who Melissa really was. The next morning, I decided to do some gentle investigating while Tyler was at his office. I started with what seemed like innocent curiosity, searching for consulting firms in Charlotte that might be competition for Tyler's new venture. What I discovered made my blood run cold. A simple LinkedIn search for Melissa Consulting Charlotte yielded immediate results. Melissa Hartwell, MBA from Duke University, 15 years of corporate restructuring experience, recently relocated from Atlanta. But it was her last name that made my hands shake as I scrolled through her profile. Hartwell. Tyler's last name before he married me was Hartwell. He'd taken my surname, Monroe, when we wed, something he'd claimed was progressive and romantic at the time. My heart pounded as I dug deeper. Marriage records from Fulton County, Georgia, showed Tyler Hartwell married to Melissa Catherine Brennan in 2009. Divorce records from the same county showed their dissolution in 2014, just 1 year before Tyler and I began dating. Melissa was Tyler's ex-wife. The ex-wife he'd never mentioned in 8 years of marriage. I leaned back in my home office chair, staring at the computer screen in disbelief. Tyler had always been vague about his past relationships, claiming he preferred to focus on our future together rather than dwelling on what hadn't worked. I'd found his perspective mature and refreshing compared to men who couldn't stop talking about their exes. Now I understood why he'd been so secretive. He hadn't just omitted details about a past relationship. He'd completely hidden the existence of a 5-year marriage. The timeline was damning. Tyler and Melissa divorced in January 2014, Tyler moved to Charlotte in March 2014. We met at a professional networking event in February 2015. He'd taken an entire year to establish himself in a new city before entering into a relationship with me. But why hide the marriage? And why was Melissa suddenly back in his life as a business partner? I spent the rest of the day researching Melissa's background. Her social media presence was minimal, but professional. Recent photos showed an attractive brunette in her early 40s, always impeccably dressed in designer business attire. Her LinkedIn indicated she'd been working for a major consulting firm in Atlanta until 3 months ago. 3 months ago, right around the time Tyler had started staying late at the office more frequently, claiming he was working on expanding his client base. When Tyler came home that evening, I watched him carefully as he moved through our usual routines. He seemed lighter somehow, more energetic than he'd been in months. During dinner, he mentioned stopping by the office space he and Melissa were considering for their firm. "It's perfect," he said, describing a downtown location with floor-to-ceiling windows and modern amenities. "Melissa has such great taste in design. She's already envisioning how we'll set up the conference rooms." I nodded and smiled, but inside, I was planning my next investigative steps. Over the weekend, I volunteered to help Tyler organize his home office, an offer that surprised him since I'd never shown interest in his paperwork before. While he was in the shower, I photographed several documents, including what appeared to be business loan applications and partnership agreements for something called Hartwell and Associates Consulting Group. They were keeping his original surname for the business, not Monroe, the name he'd taken when he married me. Hartwell, the name he'd shared with Melissa. The loan documents revealed they were seeking $300,000 in startup capital. But what made my stomach drop was seeing Tyler's signature on forms listing Melissa as his emergency contact, not me. There was also a lease agreement for a downtown Charlotte office space that both Tyler and Melissa had signed as co-tenants. Monday morning, I called in sick to work and drove to the address on the lease. The building was sleek and modern, exactly as Tyler had described. Through the lobby windows, I could see an office on the 3rd floor, with Hartwell and Associates already painted on the glass door. I waited in my car for 2 hours before I saw them. Tyler and Melissa emerged from the building together, and what I witnessed made everything crystal clear. This wasn't just a business partnership. Tyler placed his hand on the small of Melissa's back as they walked to his car, the same intimate gesture he used to guide me through crowded restaurants. When Melissa stumbled slightly on the curb, Tyler caught her elbow and steadied her, and she looked up at him with an expression I recognized all too well. It was the same adoring look I'd given him during our early dating days. But the most damning evidence came when Tyler helped Melissa into the passenger seat of his car. As he closed her door, I saw him lean down and kiss her forehead tenderly through the window. It was brief, but unmistakably affectionate. I followed them to an upscale restaurant downtown, parking far enough away to remain undetected. Through the restaurant's windows, I watched them share lunch like lovers, not business partners. They sat closer than necessary, Melissa's hand frequently touching Tyler's arm as she spoke, both of them laughing with the easy intimacy of people who knew each other's rhythms perfectly. Of course they did. They'd been married for 5 years. When they left the restaurant, I saw Tyler's hand rest on Melissa's lower back again as they walked to his car. This time, she leaned into him slightly, a gesture so natural it could only come from muscle memory. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing through the implications. Tyler wasn't just hiding his past marriage, he was rekindling it under the guise of a business partnership. The consulting firm was likely just a cover story, a way to legitimize spending time together and potentially planning their future. That evening, Tyler came home later than usual, claiming he'd been working late with Melissa on the business plan. He seemed refreshed and energetic, humming while he showered. I knew then that I couldn't confront him directly. I needed more information, and I needed a plan that would expose the truth in a way that protected my interests. The next few weeks became a careful dance of deception on both sides. Tyler grew increasingly excited about the business launch, scheduled for the first Friday in November. while I quietly gathered evidence of what I was beginning to understand was a much larger betrayal than I'd initially imagined. My breakthrough came when I decided to hire a private investigator named Patricia Williams, a former police detective who specialized in marital infidelity cases. I met her at a coffee shop near my office, feeling like a character in a noir film as I slid a folder of photographs and documents across the table. "I need to know exactly what my husband is hiding," I told her. Patricia's report arrived 5 days later, and it was devastating. Tyler and Melissa had never truly ended their relationship. According to Patricia's findings, their divorce in 2014 had been a financial maneuver to protect their assets during a business bankruptcy. Melissa had been running a consulting firm in Atlanta that failed spectacularly, leaving them with significant debt. After the divorce, Tyler had moved to Charlotte under an assumed identity. He'd legally changed his name from Tyler Hartwell to Tyler Monroe before we met, taking the surname of a deceased distant relative. Meanwhile, Melissa had remained in Atlanta, working to rebuild her professional reputation while slowly paying off their shared debts. But the most shocking revelation was that they'd been in contact throughout my entire marriage to Tyler. Phone records showed hundreds of calls and text messages between them over the past 8 years. Financial records revealed Tyler had been sending Melissa monthly payments of $1,500, money he'd claimed was going toward his retirement investments. The consulting firm wasn't a new venture. It was phase 2 of their original plan. They'd been waiting for Melissa's professional reputation to recover, and for Tyler to establish himself financially in Charlotte. Once both objectives were achieved, they could reunite publicly and restart their business together. I was never supposed to be a permanent part of Tyler's life. I was a placeholder, a source of financial stability and social respectability while he waited for Melissa to become viable again. The evidence Patricia gathered was overwhelming. Photographs of Tyler and Melissa together at various Atlanta hotels over the past 8 years. Credit card records showing Tyler had purchased expensive jewelry that never appeared in our home. Gifts meant for Melissa. Even more damaging were email exchanges between them discussing their future plans and how they would handle the Charlotte situation when the time was right. The Charlotte situation, that's what I was to them. Reading their emails felt like being punched repeatedly in the stomach. Tyler wrote to Melissa about how much he missed her, how difficult it was to maintain his arrangement with me, how he couldn't wait for them to be together again, once everything was in place. Melissa's responses were equally damning. She referred to me as your Charlotte problem, and discussed strategies for Tyler to gradually disentangle himself from our marriage without arousing suspicion. They'd planned for Tyler to initiate divorce proceedings 6 months after their business launch, claiming irreconcilable differences. But the most infuriating discovery was their timeline. The business launch wasn't just about starting a consulting firm, it was their reunion celebration. Patricia had uncovered evidence that they'd already planned a business trip to Napa Valley the week after the launch, staying at a luxury resort where they'd honeymooned 20 years ago. I sat in my car after meeting Patricia, holding the investigative report and feeling my entire world reshape itself around this new reality. 8 years of my life had been built on lies. 8 years of believing I'd found love with a man who was simply biding his time until he could return to his real life. But as the initial shock faded, something harder and more focused took its place. Tyler and Melissa thought they were so clever, manipulating everyone around them to achieve their goals. They had no idea that their carefully orchestrated deception was about to become the foundation of their public humiliation. Armed with Patricia's evidence, I began planning my own deception. The business launch party was scheduled for Friday evening at the Omni Charlotte Hotel, a lavish event Tyler had insisted on hosting to properly introduce Hartwell and Associates to the Charlotte business community. He'd invited over 200 people, including clients, colleagues, city officials, and prominent local business leaders. Tyler had asked me to help with the planning, which gave me perfect access to all the details. I volunteered to handle the catering arrangements, the audio-visual setup, and the guest list management. Tyler was delighted by my enthusiasm, interpreting it as support for his new venture. If only he knew what I was really planning. I spent 3 weeks preparing my presentation. Working with Patricia, I compiled a comprehensive dossier of Tyler and Melissa's deception, complete with timelines, financial records, phone logs, photographs, and email exchanges. Patricia helped me organize everything into a clear, chronological narrative that would be impossible to deny or dismiss. But I wanted more than just exposure. I wanted legal protection and financial justice. While Tyler was at work, I met with my attorney, Catherine Phillips, to discuss my options. Catherine was a shark in an elegant suit, known throughout Charlotte for her ruthless efficiency in high-stakes divorce cases. "You have enough evidence to destroy him," Catherine said after reviewing Patricia's report. "But let's be strategic about this. We can file for divorce immediately and seek significant compensatory damages based on his fraudulent conduct during your marriage." "What about the business?" I asked. Catherine smiled, a predatory expression that made me glad she was on my side. "Here's where it gets interesting. According to North Carolina law, any assets acquired during marriage through deceptive means can be subject to equitable distribution. Since Tyler used marital funds to support this business venture while concealing its true nature, you could have a claim to significant portions of their startup capital and future earnings." But Catherine's most brilliant suggestion involved Tyler's legal vulnerabilities. He changed his identity before marrying you, which could constitute fraud. If he took on debt or made financial commitments using his assumed identity without properly disclosing his past, there could be criminal implications as well as civil ones. I authorized Catherine to begin preparing all necessary legal documents: divorce papers, fraud claims, business partnership disputes, and requests for immediate asset freezing. Everything would be ready to file the moment I gave the word. Meanwhile, I continued playing the supportive wife. I helped Tyler choose his suit for the launch party. I reviewed the guest list with him, suggesting additional invites from my own professional network at Amberlin Ventures. I even offered to give a brief speech at the event about how proud I was of his entrepreneurial spirit. Tyler was touched by my support. "You know, Lorraine, I was worried you might feel left out of this new chapter," he said one evening. "But you've been so understanding about the time I'm spending with Melissa on the business. I really appreciate that." I smiled and kissed his cheek. "I just want you to be happy, honey." 3 days before the launch party, I made my final preparations. I arranged for Patricia to attend the event as a server. She'd obtained employment with the catering company for the evening. I coordinated with Catherine to have process servers standing by. Most importantly, I prepared my presentation materials. The evidence would be displayed on the same large screens Tyler planned to use for his business presentation. While he thought he'd be showing slides about consulting services and growth projections, I'd be revealing the truth about Hartwell and Associates and the fraudulent marriage that funded it. Tyler had no idea that his celebration was about to become his reckoning. For 8 years, he'd manipulated and deceived me. On Friday night, I was going to return the favor in the most public way possible. Friday evening arrived with unseasonable warmth for November in Charlotte. I spent extra time getting ready, choosing a striking red dress that Tyler had always complimented me on. If this was going to be my final performance as his wife, I wanted to look unforgettable. Tyler was practically vibrating with excitement as we drove to the Omni Charlotte Hotel. "I can't believe this day is finally here," he said, adjusting his tie for the 5th time. "Everything Melissa and I have worked toward is about to pay off. I'm sure it will be a night to remember," I replied, and I meant every word. The hotel ballroom looked elegant. Soft lighting, fresh flower arrangements, and cocktail tables scattered throughout the space. A small stage had been set up at the front with a podium and large projection screens. Tyler had spared no expense. This was his moment to reintroduce himself to Charlotte's business community alongside his new partner. Guests began arriving at 6 p.m. I recognized many faces from Tyler's client base, along with several colleagues from my own work at Amberlin Ventures. Tyler worked the room like a politician, introducing Melissa to everyone as his brilliant business partner, while she stood beside him in a stunning navy blue dress, playing the role of successful consultant perfectly. Watching them together, I could see how natural their partnership appeared. They moved in sync, finished each other's sentences, and shared the easy chemistry of people who'd known each other for decades. Because they had. At 7 p.m., Tyler took the stage to officially begin the presentation. "Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight," he began, his voice confident and warm. "I'm thrilled to introduce you to Hartwell & Associates Consulting Group and my incredible business partner, Melissa Hartwell." The room applauded politely as Melissa joined Tyler on stage. She took the microphone with practiced ease, beginning to speak about their consulting philosophy and target market. They were a compelling team, professional, articulate, and convincing. But as Melissa clicked to advance their presentation slides, nothing happened. She tried again, pressing the remote more firmly. The screens remained blank. "Technical difficulties," Tyler said with a laugh, walking over to check the computer connections. "Just give us one moment." That's when I stood up from my table near the back of the room. "Actually, there's no technical problem," I announced, my voice carrying clearly across the ballroom. "I've simply loaded a different presentation." All heads turned toward me. Tyler's face went pale as he recognized my voice, but he couldn't see me clearly through the stage lights. Melissa squinted in my direction, confusion evident on her face. "Ladies and gentlemen," I continued, walking toward the front of the room as conversations died throughout the ballroom. "I'm Lorraine Monroe, Tyler's wife of 8 years, and I have some information about Hartwell & Associates that I think you'll find very interesting." Tyler stepped forward, panic creeping into his voice. "Lorraine, what are you doing? This isn't the time for—" "Actually, this is the perfect time," I interrupted, reaching the stage. "You see, Tyler has been telling you about his new business partnership with Melissa, but he's left out some crucial details about their relationship." I pressed the remote in my hand, and the first slide of my presentation appeared on the screens behind them. It was a copy of Tyler and Melissa's marriage certificate from 2009. The ballroom fell completely silent. Tyler and Melissa stood frozen on stage, staring at the screen in horror. I could see the exact moment when Tyler realized that his carefully constructed deception was about to crumble in front of everyone who mattered to his professional future. "Let me tell you the real story of Hartwell & Associates," I said, clicking to the next slide. The next slide showed phone records spanning 8 years, hundreds of calls and text messages between Tyler and Melissa throughout our entire marriage. Gasps echoed through the ballroom as the timestamp evidence became clear on the large screens. "While Tyler was married to me," I continued, my voice steady and clear, "he was also maintaining a relationship with his ex-wife, Melissa. They've been planning this reunion for years, using our marriage as cover while they rebuilt their financial and professional standing." Tyler tried to step toward the microphone, but I moved to block him. "Lorraine, please stop this," he whispered urgently. "We can talk about this privately." "We've had 8 years to talk privately," I replied, clicking to the next slide. "Now it's time for the truth." The screen displayed copies of financial transfers. Tyler's monthly payments to Melissa, totaling over $100,000 of marital funds sent to his ex-wife without my knowledge. The audience murmured in shock and disapproval. "Tyler changed his identity when he moved to Charlotte," I announced, showing the legal name change documents. "He was Tyler Hartwell when he married Melissa, and he became Tyler Monroe to marry me. What you're witnessing tonight isn't the launch of a new business. It's the reunion of divorced spouses who never actually separated." Melissa finally found her voice. "This is completely inappropriate," she said, reaching for the microphone. "These are private matters that have nothing to do with our consulting firm." I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "Private matters? You mean like planning to divorce me 6 months after tonight? Or your business trip to Napa Valley next week? The same resort where you honeymooned 20 years ago." The final slide appeared. Email exchanges between Tyler and Melissa, referring to me as the Charlotte situation, and discussing their timeline for ending our marriage once their business was established. Tyler's face had gone from pale to gray. Around the ballroom, guests were whispering among themselves, some already moving toward the exits. The ballroom erupted in chaos as my presentation concluded. Guests stood up from their tables, some staring at the screens in disbelief, others gathering their belongings to leave immediately. The careful networking event Tyler had planned was dissolving into a scandal that would be talked about throughout Charlotte's business community for months. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, raising my voice over the commotion, "there's one more thing you should know before you leave." The room quieted slightly as people paused to listen. As of this morning, I've filed for divorce from Tyler on grounds of fraud and deception. I've also initiated legal proceedings to freeze all assets related to Hartwell and Associates, pending investigation of financial improprieties. I gestured toward the back of the room where Patricia stood near the entrance, no longer disguised as catering staff. Additionally, the Securities and Exchange Commission has been notified about potential violations related to Tyler's financial advisory practice and his undisclosed identity changes. Tyler slumped against the podium, the weight of public and legal consequences hitting him simultaneously. Melissa stood beside him, her professional composure finally cracking as she realized their reunion celebration had become a professional death sentence. "The $300,000 in startup capital you've secured for this consulting firm," I continued, clicking to display loan documents, "that's now frozen as marital assets subject to litigation. Your office lease, your business licenses, your professional liability insurance, all obtained through fraudulent means." I walked to the edge of the stage, looking out over the departing crowd. "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. You've witnessed something truly rare, complete transparency in business and marriage." Tyler finally spoke, his voice barely audible over the ballroom's acoustics. "Lorraine, you don't understand. This isn't what you think." "What I think," I interrupted, "is that your consulting firm just had its first and last client meeting. Unfortunately for you, the client was your wife, and the consultation revealed that your business model is built entirely on fraud." The exodus from the ballroom accelerated as my words sank in. Tyler and Melissa's professional networks were witnessing the destruction of their reputations in real time. Tyler and Melissa faced swift and severe consequences for their deception. The frozen assets crippled their consulting firm before it could begin operations, and the SEC investigation revealed additional financial improprieties in Tyler's advisory practice that resulted in criminal charges. Their professional licenses were suspended pending investigation, and the scandal made them unemployable in Charlotte's business community. Melissa returned to Atlanta in disgrace, while Tyler faced bankruptcy and potential prison time for fraud. Their elaborate reunion plan had cost them everything they'd worked to rebuild. As I stood in my newly redecorated home office months later, reviewing the final divorce settlement that awarded me significant compensation for Tyler's fraudulent conduct, I reflected on how completely my life had transformed. The business launch that was supposed to mark their triumph had instead become their downfall, and I discovered that the sweetest revenge was simply allowing the truth to destroy the lies they'd built their future on.